Good evening, everyone. Guys, am I audible? Yeah, thank you. So, I hope you are all able to view my screen. Okay.
ఒకటి మీకు జ్ఞాపకం చేయాలని కోరుతున్నాను. గ్రీకులోనే వృత్త నిబంధన గ్రీకులోనే వ్రాయబడింది కాబట్టి ఆ గ్రీకులోనే
Okay. So, in the last session, in our introduction, we were discussing about what are the three different modules that we will be discussing in this particular course, right? So, out of that, the first module is security risk assessment, which is where we will be learning about different kind of hacking attacks. Right. So today we'll be starting with this module one. Okay, so let us see what actually is hacking. So earlier we were discussing what is hacking, right? So let us see in detail what is this hacking and all, right? So as we have discussed earlier in our introduction, hacking can be defined as a intrusion into someone else's systems or into someone else's network, right? So hacking is nothing but trying to get in or trying to intrude into someone's system or into someone's network. And this hacking can be done in different ways. So a hacker can perform these hacking activities in different ways. The first method is by exploiting a vulnerability. So hacker tries to exploit a vulnerability on a host, and based on this vulnerability, a hacker will try to launch an attack. Now, say for example, I'll go with the same example that we were discussing on the other session. So as an administrator, you have configured your organization's server. Now let's say on this server, you have your company's website running. So you have your organization's website running here. And this particular server is also accessible from internet. Your server is also accessible from internet. So once you make your server accessible from internet, any user on internet will be able to access your company's website. Is that correct? Any user on internet will be able to access your website. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. So assume there is a hacker who wants to launch an attack and compromise your mission, right? So here we have a hacker. So this hacker is trying to launch an attack and compromise your server. So what this hacker does, hacker tries to identify if there are any loopholes or if there is some kind of weakness on your mission. So hacker will try to identify if there are any loopholes or if there are any kind of weakness on your server. So if there are some weakness, or say there are some loopholes on your mission, then based on the weakness on your server, a hacker can launch an attack and try to compromise it. Right. So the first technique is a hacker tries to identify what is the weakness on your system. By understanding the weakness on your system, hacker will try to launch an attack and compromise it. So here when you say weakness or loopholes, technically we call them as a vulnerability. So technically we call them as a vulnerability. Right. So hacker would try to identify if there is a vulnerability on the target system. Right. Hacker will try to identify if there is a vulnerability on the target system. And based on this vulnerability, hacker will try to launch an attack and compromise your mission. Right. So this is the first technique. Try to identify what kind of loopholes are present and then try to launch an attack. So is it clear, everyone? Okay. Yeah. So the first technique that a hacker would use is try to identify the vulnerabilities. And the second method that a hacker is trying to use is to steal our passwords. So, guys, are you all using passwords on a day-to-day basis? So, you're all using passwords on a day-to-day basis, right? So, what actually is a password? So, password is an authentication mechanism, right? So, using a password, you try to identify yourself, or you try to tell the system who exactly you are, right? So, here, whenever you try to use a password, you will also have some user information. It can be a user ID, a username, your email ID, anything, right? So, in general, you have something like a username or a user ID, and you'll have a password along with this user ID or the username. So now, when you speak about our authentication systems, right, what all authentication mechanisms we are using so far, do you think these authentication mechanisms are trying to identify the given user ID and the password only, or does it also try to identify the user who is typing this information? So, what exactly does the authentication mechanism check for? Is it only checking the user ID and password, or does it also check which user is typing this username and password? So, all the authentication mechanisms, what we have, right? They only check for this information: what is the provided user ID and what is the provided password. And if this information is correct, user will be permitted to access the resource. Right. So it's not really checking the user, right? So your authentication mechanism is not really checking the user, right? So let us say, if you know what is my user ID and password. You will be able to log into my system. You will be able to log into my router, my firewall, my server, my online account, and all. Right. So that's because the authentication mechanisms does not really verify the user who types it. Right. They're all designed to verify if the provided username and the provided password is correct or not. So, taking advantage of this particular behavior, hackers are trying to use various techniques to steal our usernames and passwords. Right. Hackers use various techniques to steal our usernames and passwords because our authentication systems are not really verifying who is typing this information. Right. So whoever types this user ID and password, if the provided information is correct, that user will be given access to the data. Right. So taking advantage of this, hackers are actually trying to crack your user IDs and passwords using various techniques. So we'll be discussing all the techniques. We'll be doing them practically. Right. So hackers are trying to steal our passwords and then try to take control of our resources or try to take control of our systems. So that's the second technique. And the third technique that hackers are using is by using some backdoor applications or remote access tools. Hackers use some remote access tools or backdoor applications. Now, for you to get an understanding about this, let me ask you a simple question. Uh, how many of you have used cracked software or a pirated version of the software? So, most of us at one or the other point would have used a pirated software or a cracked software, right? So, here, when you speak about the pirated software or the cracked version, any specific application that you have used, Nagraj? Which application did you use? Okay, Windows 10 and Edit Plus. Right? Okay, now let's say for example, we'll take an example of Windows 10, right? Now, who makes this Windows 10? Who makes this software Windows 10? Uh, Guys, is audio clear? Yeah, okay. So when you speak about Windows 10, we know Microsoft is a organization who makes it. And this Microsoft, they are not giving this Windows 10 application for free. They say you have to pay Microsoft, right? So that you can use Windows 10 operating system. Right? You'll have to pay so that you can use a Windows operating system. Now the thing is, when you say you are trying to use a cracked version or a pirated version, right? So who is giving us this pirated version? Is it also given by Microsoft or is it by someone else? So the pirated version is not given by Microsoft themselves. Right? Pirated version is given by someone else. Right? Okay. So this someone else, let us call them some XYZ. So they are giving us a Windows 10. Uh, let's say they call it with different names like the pre-activated version or maybe the pirated version or maybe what do we say like the license crack or activator or keygen. They use different names, different terminology. So now for this XYZ, it may be a individual user or it may be an organization, whatever it is, right? Now for this XYZ to give you a crack of this Windows 10, to give you a crack of the Windows 10, do they need to get the Windows 10 operating system in the first place, try to see how exactly does this Windows 10 get activated, which service or which module in Windows 10 is responsible for that activation. Try to identify all the details and then try to make some modifications to the system, try to make some modifications to the Windows 10 system so that it will not ask you for any kind of authentication or authentication. It will not ask you for any kind of activation. Is that correct? They have to get the Windows original software. They have to see how exactly this activation is working. And then they have to make some changes to the Windows 10 operating system so that whenever you are trying to download and install it on your computer, it should not ask you for any kind of activation. Right. So it's not the original version of Windows 10 what Microsoft has given. So they have taken this Windows 10, they made some modifications so that it does not ask us for any kind of activation key and all this. And then they are distributing a modified version to us. Now, are these modifications only related to the activation, or is there a possibility that something else is also modified? So these modifications, is it only for the activation, or is there a chance that something else is also modified on the system? So there is a chance that this XYZ would have made some other modifications also. As an end user, we are not aware of it. We go by whatever description they give. They say we have made some changes so that you don't need to go with Windows activation. But are we really sure? Are we 100% sure that except for the activation, there is no other changes? No such guarantee, right? There is no such assurance that except for the activation part, nothing else has been changed. So generally what these hackers they are trying to do is they take up some popular software. It can be Windows, it can be your Adobe softwares, or it can be your Office, it can be your antivirus, right? So any kind of softwares which mostly end users try to download these cracked versions. So they take up the software, right? Up the software, they make some changes to it, and then distribute these modified versions. Now these changes will permit XYZ to take full control of your system. So whatever modifications that XYZ has done, right, will let XYZ take full control of your system. Right? So this system, it can be your mobile phone, it can be your PC, it can be your server. So if you are trying to download and use some pirated softwares, there's always a risk that this pirated software has been modified so that the hacker, whoever has done these modifications and all, will be able to gain direct access to your system. So such softwares are called backdoor applications. Right. Such softwares are called backdoor applications. Right. So the third method that hackers are using is by backdoor applications. So a backdoor is nothing but a software which pretends to be the genuine version, but it has been modified to give away full access to the hacker. Okay. So a software which is pretending to be a genuine version, but it has been modified to give away full access of your computer to the hacker. So is it clear, everyone? Mr. Nagaraj, when you say clickbait, we don't use the clickbait terminology here. Clickbait is mostly like where you are trying to give some news, or you are trying to get some views or clicks for your web page or your blog and all. Okay, so here these are the three different techniques that hackers are using to compromise the systems. One is try to find out the vulnerability. Based on the vulnerability, try to launch an attack and compromise the system. The second method, try to steal the password with end users, then try to gain access to the resources. Third method, try to use a backdoor application and take control of the user's system. So here, when you speak about the person, right? When you speak about the person, whoever is doing this hacking activities, you call the person as a hacker. And speaking of different sort of skills that a hacker should have, right? Uh, Guys, is the audio clear? Echo. Okay, okay, so I'll also keep monitoring this thing. So in case you find some disturbance in the audio or there is some kind of echo or some breaking, please let me know. Yeah. So here, when you speak about different sort of skills that a hacker should have, right? A hacker should have very good expertise with different skills like understanding the networking concepts, understanding different operating systems and applications. Now, why would a hacker need very good understanding with the networking concepts? Any guess? So here, when we take up our example, I said a hacker tries to identify the vulnerabilities on a server and try to launch some attack. Right now, in this case, if you see, the hacker is somewhere on internet. So this hacker, this person, is not in our office. This person does not have direct access to our system or our server. Right. So the hacker is somewhere on internet, and hacker has to identify if there is a vulnerability on our server or not. If there is a vulnerability, hacker will try to launch the attack. But now for this hacker to identify if there is a vulnerability on our system or not, should this hacker be able to communicate with our server in the first place? So for a hacker to identify if there is a vulnerability on our system or not, hacker has to communicate with our server, right? So that's the minimum requirement. So hacker has to communicate with our server. hacker has to see how to communicate, because hacker should understand what all services are running there, right? Hacker has to see whether hacker has to initiate a HTTP request or FTP request or SMTP or what sort of a request, right? And then hacker should also identify how exactly the request is going from hacker's computer to your target server, what all other devices are present in between, and how do they process your data and all, right? So hacker should have good understanding with the networking concepts to see how to communicate with your server, right? And to start with the basic communication part. Okay. And then let's say hacker knows what is the IP address of your server. Hacker knows what kind of services are running on your machine. Hacker is able to initiate the basic connectivity. Now, once the hacker is trying to initiate a request, right? Let's say hacker says, I want to access HTTP on say 1.1.1.9, assuming 1.1.1.9 is the public IP address of your server, right? Hacker is saying, I want to reach 1.1.1.9. Now the request from hacker's system will be reaching your server. So whatever the request that hacker is trying to initiate would be reaching your server. So there's a request like this from hacker's computer. There is a request. So there's a HTTP request to your server. So once you got a request, who is going to accept this request and start processing it in the first place? So if the request is coming to your machine, to your server, right? See, when we say your server, it is a combination of your hardware and also the software, right? It's a combination of your hardware and the software, your server. So will the hardware do any processing or will it be done by the software? So you are getting some request from internet. So who does this processing? Hardware or software? So it is a software which is doing all the processing, right? Not the hardware. Hardware is only there to accept the incoming connection, right? Means to receive the incoming packets and all, but it is not going to be any kind of processing. Okay, so now speaking about the software, there are different softwares installed on your server. The first is your base operating system, right? So the first software that is installed is the operating system. That's the base, right? On which you will have different kind of other applications and all those things configured there, right? So whenever there is a request coming to your server, your operating system will accept it and see what is this request. So in our case, you got a HTTP request, right? So now your operating system will see, do I have the capability to process this HTTP request or not? Right. So your operating system does not directly process the HTTP connection. So what will it do? It says, okay, there is an application installed which is capable of processing the HTTP request. So let me forward it there. So what your operating system does, it is taking the incoming request from internet and then it is trying to see if this request can be processed by the operating system itself or not. If your operating system itself cannot process the request, it will see if there is any application which is capable of doing it. And let's say in your case, because you are already having a website running there, you'll have a HTTP or a web application. So it will forward the request to the web application. Web application will receive the request and then do all the processing. So here, if you are a hacker here, assume you are the hacker, should you also understand how exactly this operating system is working, where is the weakness on the operating system, and at the same time should you also understand what all applications might be installed there on the remote server, and what would be the vulnerability on that remote application. So guys, should you also understand the behavior of the operating system and the application also if you are a hacker. So you should be able to understand the behavior of this operating system and the application. Only then you can understand where exactly is the vulnerability, where is the weakness, right? So a hacker should have very good understanding with these three aspects: networking, operating system, and the applications. Then after you identify the vulnerability, you know what is the vulnerability on the remote side. So what's the next step? You will have to launch an attack and compromise it. So if you have a ready-made application which will help you to launch an attack. So here if you see, I'm not speaking about the application which is installed on the server, but I'm speaking about application which you have to use to launch an attack. Right. So hacker also needs an application using which attack can be launched. But let us say there is no ready-made application. There is no ready-made application which will help a hacker to launch the attack. So if there is no ready-made application to launch an attack, will a hacker be able to proceed with launching this attack and compromising the server? If there is no ready-made application, will a hacker be able to launch an attack and compromise the mission? No, it will not be possible, right? So for that, hacker has to create a new application. Hacker has to create a new application which will help the hacker to launch an attack and compromise the system. So to create a new application using which a hacker can launch the attack, hacker would need some knowledge on programming and scripting. Hacker would require some knowledge on programming and scripting. If hacker is an expert, it's very good. But let's say hacker is not an expert with programming or scripting. At least having some basic knowledge, a basic idea about programming and scripting will be helpful, because if you approach a programmer, right? If you are approaching a programmer to help you in creating an application, how will you tell the programmer what exactly is your requirement? You should be able to explain the programmer or the other person, whoever is going to develop an application for you, right? You should be able to explain them at least in the very minimum or the basic terms, what was the weakness or what was the loophole you found, and what exactly is the kind of attack you are trying to launch. So only if you can tell them this basic information, they can understand what is your requirement and try to create an application which will help you in launching an attack. Right. So having some basic idea about programming and scripting is always helpful. Right. Even though hacker is not an expert with those programming and scripting, having some basic idea will always be good. Similarly with the databases. So when an organization wants to store some data, right, they are always depending on a database server to store the data and all. So if you wanted to hack, you wanted to get hold of the data, you need to understand how exactly data is organized in a database. How do you read that information, right? And if you have to destroy the data, how exactly you can do that. So again, some basic understanding about databases would be helpful. It's not mandatory you should have knowledge with programming, scripting, and databases. But if you have some knowledge, it would be better. So, is it clear, everyone? What are the skills of a hacker? Yeah. So, now here, when you speak about hackers, these people can be classified into two different types: structured and unstructured hackers. Structured hackers are professionals who have very good expertise with different skills that we have been discussing so far. Unstructured hackers are beginners. Unstructured hackers are beginners. They do not have very good expertise with all the technical skills. They only have some basic understanding of what is what. So, who do you think is more dangerous, structured or unstructured hackers? A structured hacker is an expert who has very good knowledge, very good uh, sorry, very good idea about all the technical skills. An unstructured hacker is a beginner who only has some basic information about what is what. So a structured hacker is always more dangerous than an unstructured hacker. Now, when you speak about structured hackers, these people are further classified into three types: black hat hackers, white hat hackers, and gray hat hackers. Black hat hackers, their only intention is to identify what exactly is the vulnerability on your system and launch an attack, then compromise it. So, identifying the vulnerability on the system, launching an attack to compromise your system, that is the intention of a black hat hacker. A white hat hacker, their intention is to identify the vulnerabilities on your system, try to see what kind of damages can be done on your mission by a black hat hacker, and then patch it. Try to understand what is the vulnerability on your system. Try to see what sort of damages would be there on your system if a black hat hacker is trying to launch an attack, and then try to fix those vulnerabilities. That is the job of a white hat hacker. And then, speaking of gray hat, they behave as a white hat or as a black hat based on the situation. So it's not always like they are trying to launch an attack and compromise your mission, or it's not always like they're trying to help you to protect your network. So their behavior varies. Right. So sometimes they behave as a black hat, sometimes they behave as a white hat based on the situation. Right. So who is more dangerous within this structured hackers? Black hat, white hat, or gray hat? So within these three categories, black hat, white hat, and gray hat, it is always the gray hat who is more dangerous, because as a end user, you're not really sure about what are the intentions of a gray hat. They may be pretending to help you, but you're not really sure what exactly is their intention. Maybe they are pretending to help you, but they are just trying to identify all the weakness of your system and pass on this information to a black hat, or pass on this information to someone else who might launch an attack and compromise your mission. Right. So gray hat is more dangerous among black hat, white hat, and gray hat hackers. And then, as I said, unstructured hackers, they are beginners. They are just trying to learn the things. Right? They do not have very good knowledge or expertise with any of the technical skills. Right? And the worst thing, in many cases, they themselves might be a victim. Right? So in most of the cases, an unstructured hacker does not even know what are the consequences of their activities. Right? So in most cases, they themselves end up being a victim. Forget about launching an attack on someone's network and compromising it. They themselves end up being a victim. So now when you speak about hacking, is it legal or illegal? Hacking someone's network, is it legal or illegal? Illegal, right? So when you speak about hacking being illegal, why would someone do this illegal task? So there should be some special interest, right, for someone to do this illegal task. Right? So hackers are interested in stealing our data. It can be anything. It can be your personal information, your banking data, your passwords, maybe your corporate secrets, your trade secrets, right? Or your project information, your source code, and all these details. Or say hacker is not interested in stealing your data. Hacker can try to destroy your data. Right? For destroying the data, hacker can use something like a virus. So have you guys experienced a virus infection on your computer? So guys, did you face virus infection on your computer anytime? Yeah. So at one or the other point, maybe because you have executed some application or something went wrong, some virus infection might have happened. So how did you identify that there is a virus infection on your computer? How did you come to know that there is a virus infection on your computer? Okay, so your system has become slow. Okay, anything else? So sometimes you'll see that your PC performance will become very slow, and sometimes you'll not be able to run applications. They keep crashing. You'll see some new files or something created, and you'll not be able to delete them. And in some cases, you'll see that your original data itself was lost. Right. So based on this behavior, you can identify that there was a virus infection on your computer. Right? So hackers, if they are not interested in stealing your data, they can try to infect your computer with a virus and try to destroy your data. But let us say a hacker is not even interested in destroying your data. Then a hacker can perform something like a denial of service or a DOS attack. Right. So guys, is audio clear? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So here, let's say a hacker doesn't want to steal your data or hacker doesn't want to destroy your data. Hacker can stop you from accessing your data or your resources also. Right. So for this, hacker can try to launch something called denial of service or a DOS attack. Just for you to get a understanding. Now let's say in our earlier example, I've taken that you have a website configured on your server, right? So we can call this server as a web server, right? Now let's say your server can accept and process 1000 connections per every second, right? Your server can accept and process 1000 connections per every second. Now let's say instead of 1000 connections, you started receiving something like 6000 or 7000 connections per second, right? You started receiving 6000 or 7000 connections per second. So if that is the case, will your server be able to accept and process all the incoming requests? So it was designed to accept and process 1000 connections per second, but you are receiving 7000 connections per second. So obviously in that case, your server will not be able to process this many number of connections, right? So if it is unable to process this many number of connections, it would crash, right? So if it is receiving too many connections from internet, right, it will not have the required resources to process it and it would crash. So if the server has crashed, will anyone be able to access the website? It can be your employee or it can be an internet user or the administrator himself. Will not be possible, right? Internet users will not be able to access the website. Your office users, your employees will not be able to access the website, or even the admin himself will not be able to access it. Right? So you call this as a denial of service. So if hacker wants to stop end users from accessing your resources, a hacker can try to launch or a hacker can try to initiate a denial of service attack on the server. Right? So different kind of attacks, right? So is it clear why hackers are trying to do this illegal task? They are either interested in stealing your data, or they are trying to destroy your data, or sometimes they may stop you from accessing your own resources. So is it clear, everyone? Why hackers are taking up this illegal task of hacking? What sort of interest do they have? Yeah. So let's proceed. So now when you speak about what exactly is a target, what sort of system or what sort of a network would be targeted by hackers? So in this, it's a very simple thing. Basically, any system that's connected to internet is vulnerable to attack. Right? So it can be belonging to government organization, it can be belonging to a private organization, it can belong to your data center, maybe a financial institution like a bank or something, online shopping portals, social media, right? So any kind of resource that is connected to internet is a target to the hacker, right? And this does not only include resources related to large enterprise networks or corporate networks, your mobile phone, my mobile phone, right? End user devices, your smart televisions, smart speakers, right? They are all targets for hacking attacks. Right? So, assuming an organization's network has been compromised, let us see what sort of damages do they have to face. So first thing, obviously, once a hacker gain access to your system or gain access to your resources, they try to steal your data, right? And once the data is stolen, right? So hackers are trying to steal your data, and this data includes all your organization related data, your project information, your employees data, your customer information, and all, right? So information theft and identity theft are some issues that an organization has to worry about. If there is a DOS attack, as we were discussing earlier, if there are too many requests coming to your server will not be able to accept and process them, right? So unavailability of resources. So end user wants to connect to your server, access your resources, but unfortunately the server is not responding to them, right? Direct and indirect financial losses because your network is down, your activities or your business is not running as usual, right? And once someone knows that so and so organization's network has been compromised, their network or their servers have been attacked, will the end user feel comfortable to continue doing business with you? Say, assume your servers have been compromised, your data has been stolen, and somehow this information was leaked to the general public. Obviously, general public would fear, what about safety of all my data? So if I'm trying to fill a form, I'm trying to create a user account there, I'm giving my contact number, I'm giving my card information, or say my PAN information or my Aadhaar information and all. What happens to all this data? Will it be safe? So obviously they'll have a lot of questions, right? And with all these questions in mind, obviously they will not feel comfortable continuing business with you, right? So is it not a bad reputation to the organization? So that would be a very bad impact, right? So bad reputation to the organization and the trustworthiness, right? And once end users are not comfortable to do business with you or to continue doing business with you, what happens to the financial health of an organization? Without business, no revenues, right? And what about all the people working for the organization? So that's a cyclic chain, right? So if there are no employees, organization would not be able to provide proper services. If services are not good, end user would not be happy. End user is not happy, they don't do business. No business, no money, no money, no employees. So that would be a dead end. So is it clear what sort of problems an organization has to face if their network has been compromised? Yeah. So now coming back to ourselves, administrators. If you've recollect in the last session, we were discussing about who designs this organization network and all, right? So when you are doing your MCSC and CCNA, you have seen, you have learned how to configure servers, you have learned how to configure routers, switches and all, right? So obviously administrators, you are the ones who are going to configure the network. So administrators are the ones who are going to configure the networks. So what are the problems faced by administrators in protecting the network? Why they are not able to protect the network? Why these networks are being compromised? Can we say administrators are not doing their job properly? Guys, what do you say? Are administrators not doing their job properly? May not be, right? So it may not be true to all the cases, right? So we should not always say admins are not doing their job properly, right? There are some issues that even administrators face, right? First thing, when you speak about the different kind of problems, generally when you learn MCSC or CCNA and all, right? We speak about administrator trying to configure the network resources, be it server, be it client computers and all, right? So generally, if administrator is the one who is trying to configure the server, who is trying to configure the client computers, who is going to write all the security policies, set up everything and all, everything would be good, right? But the problem is today, if you speak about organizations network, on a live environment, right? Organizations are saying end users can bring their own devices. So there's a concept called BYOD, bring your own device. So end user can bring their own device, connect it to the office network and start working. Now let's say I am your employee, you are the administrator of Zoom Technologies, right? I am the employee of Zoom Technologies, right? Now, once the company says I can bring my own device to office and start working on it. Now, what will I do? I bring my laptop to office. I connect it to the office Wi-Fi network or office LAN network. I'll start working on my activities. So whatever activity I'm supposed to do, I do it. But when I bring my laptop to the office network and try to connect it, as an administrator, do you know if my laptop is really secure? Do you know the operating system that I have installed is genuine version or it is a cracked version? Or not only operating system, every other application that I have installed on my computer. Do you know if it is a genuine version or a cracked version? No. As an administrator, you do not know that. Now, let's say because you are not really sure if my computer is safe or not, you have taken some time to verify all the details of my computer, right? You have taken some time to verify all the details of my computer, and then you have permitted me to join the Wi-Fi network or to join the LAN network in office, right? So after all the verification, maybe this verification would be taking some time, 1 hour or 2 hours of your time. After doing a thorough verification, you have now permitted me to connect my laptop to office network. Good. But let's say in the evening, say after 5 or 6, I take my laptop, go back to my home, and after going back to my home, maybe I want to download a movie or I want to download a game or something. So I visit some XYZ website, try to download it and install it. Now, as an end user, when I'm trying to download and install softwares or games or something from some XYZ website, is there a guarantee that whatever software or whatever game I'm downloading from this XYZ is clean without any kind of malware? So, guys, what do you say? So, whatever the game or whatever the software that I have downloaded from this XYZ, is there a guarantee that it is clean without any kind of malware? No guarantee, right? There is a chance that whatever software I have downloaded or whatever game I have downloaded might have a virus or it might have some kind of malware. And then the next day morning, I'm bringing the same laptop to office and I right. So now again the problem is as an administrator, are you sure my computer is safe? There's no guarantee, right? There's no guarantee that my computer is safe. So yesterday you have taken some time, maybe 1 or 1.5 hour of time. You have checked my computer and then you have permitted or you're authorizing me to connect my computer to the network. So guys, is the voice clear? Yeah. Not sure why some of you have the issues and why some others don't have it. But anyway, yeah. So in this case, once I take this laptop back to my home and I try to download and install something, right? There's a chance that my computer might have got infected. And the next day when I come back to office, right? Again, for a administrator, there is no guarantee if my computer is still safe or not. Now, in this case, on day two, Will the administrator again spend 1 or 2 hours of time trying to check if my computer is safe? Is it possible? So it would not be possible for administrator to spend 1 hour or 2 hours of time every day to check if my computer is safe or not. And I'm not the only one who's bringing my laptop. There are so many other employees who are also bringing their laptops to office network, right? So it would be an impossible task for the administrator to keep monitoring every user's computer on a day-to-day basis. So that's one major problem, right? So end users are trying to bring different devices connected to their organization network, and administrators are not really sure, right, if these systems are safe or not. Right? Of course, at the same time, there are technologies available which can check if a computer is safe or not. Only if a computer is safe, if it is meeting some minimum security requirements, only then it will be allowed to join the network. But again, the problem is why company is not giving me a system or a laptop? Why is it asking me to bring my own system? So why is the organization asking the end user to bring their own system without providing them with a laptop or without providing them with a system? So the reason is organization is not willing to spend much on the systems there, right? So they don't want to spend much on procuring all the new systems and all this cost cutting. Right? So when organization is going with cost cutting, can we again ask them to purchase a different tool, right, which will verify each and every computer that is joining the network and see if it is safe or not? So technologies are available, right? You call those technologies as network access control or NAC. But again, it depends on the organization if they are willing to spend on a network access control system or not. So this is one issue why administrators are failing in providing proper security to your network. The other reason, today if you see, when end users start bringing their own devices and all, is there a guarantee that every user's computer has the same kind of operating system, the same kind of applications and all? There's no such guarantee, right? Every user might have a different version of operating system, a different version of applications and all installed, right? And in some cases, some users might be using Windows, some might be using Linux, some might be having Mac. So different kind of operating systems. So will it be possible to include all these different systems into a single domain and control them in a uniform fashion? Again, that's also not a possibility, right? So you'll not be able to include all the systems and control them in a uniform fashion, right? So again, this is another problem that administrators face, right? And one of the reason why they are unable to properly secure our networks, right? So different kind of systems, different sort of requirements, different kind of approach, right? So you cannot bring all the systems in the same way. You cannot treat every system in the same way to protect a network. That's one reason. The other reason, as we have already discussed, organizations are saying end user can bring their own devices and all, and administrators are not really sure if these systems or if these devices are all secure or not. And the other problem, going back to what you have learned in your MCSC or CCNA. In the MCSC sessions, Microsoft is teaching you what is their server operating system, what all features you have, what is the functionality, how do you configure them and all. In case of Cisco, Cisco is teaching you what is the functionality of a router, what is the functionality of a switch, how do you configure it and all. But did Microsoft or Cisco tell you that this is the vulnerability on my system, and because of this vulnerability, your network can be compromised or your system can be compromised? So Microsoft or Cisco will never tell us or will never tell the end user that, see, this is the vulnerability, and because of this vulnerability, your system can be compromised. So, as an administrator, do you know what are the vulnerabilities on the system? So you should know what vulnerabilities are there, but problem is you are not aware of those vulnerabilities. So if you are not aware of the vulnerabilities, will you be able to confidently say that yes, my network is safe? So we'll not be able to confidently say that our network is safe because we ourselves do not know what kind of vulnerabilities exist on the system. Right. So all these issues together, right? All these issues together make sure that your server is not safe. So administrators, even though they try to do their best because of all these different reasons what we have discussed now, they are not successful in providing good security to your network resources. So is it clear why admins are unable to properly secure your network resources? So now let us see what is this ethical hacking. And as we have already discussed in the demo session earlier, ethical hacking is white hat hacking, or ethical hacking is the process of identifying vulnerabilities and then fixing those vulnerabilities. You are trying to identify what is the problem on the server or problem on the network, and you are trying to fix it. Right. So when you speak about an ethical hacker or a white hat hacker, earlier we were discussing about the intention of a white hat hacker. Intention of a white hat hacker is to identify what is the vulnerability on the system and then to protect it. They have to fix the vulnerabilities. But at the same time, an ethical hacker also have some limitations, right? So an ethical hacker cannot perform a network security audit until and unless they receive a signed contract from the organization. So even though you are an ethical hacker and your intentions are to identify the vulnerabilities, report it to the organization, help them in securing the network, you are not supposed to perform any kind of security audit until and unless you are authorized to do so. So you should be authorized to perform a security audit. Only then you are supposed to do the audit. Right? And then before you start doing your audit, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying that any vulnerabilities found would not be shared with anyone else except the organization. So you have to sign a document and give it back to the organization saying that if I find any vulnerabilities on this network, I will not share this information with any third party. I will only give this information to the organization. the respective administration team, but I will not share it with any third party. And once this paperwork, the legal documentation work and all is complete, then you will start the actual auditing work where you will audit a network from internet and also from within the network. So when you're auditing this network from internet, you call it as external audit. And when you're doing this auditing from within the local network, you call it as internal audit. Right. So when you're doing the auditing from internet, you call it as external audit. And when you're doing the auditing from within the local network, you call it as internal audit. So as a ethical hacker, you are supposed to perform both external audit and also internal audit. External audit will tell you what kind of attacks are possible from internet. External audit will tell you what all kind of attacks would be possible from internet. Internal audit will give you a full picture of the security status. Right. Internal audit will tell you what exactly is the status of your security, whether are your servers safe or not, what all vulnerabilities exist on your machine. Right. And you have to perform both. You'll have to perform external audit and also internal audit. Okay, is it clear? Guys, is it clear what actually an ethical hacker is supposed to do? Yeah. And then once you find some vulnerabilities on the server, right? Ethical hacker has to prepare a detailed report of all vulnerabilities found and then submit it to the client or the organization along with recommendations on how to patch the vulnerabilities. So if you are a external auditor, say you are an ethical hacker, you are authorized by an organization to perform auditing on their network, then your responsibility is to perform the audit, create a detailed report of what all vulnerabilities are present on the server, and then tell them how to fix it. You will not be doing it. So you will not be fixing the vulnerabilities. That will be done by the server admin team or whoever is responsible with the organization. Right. But let us say you are working for an organization and you are trying to perform an audit. After you do an audit, you see what all vulnerabilities are present, and then you will try to fix those vulnerabilities. So it depends who exactly you are. If you are a external auditor, you are a third party doing a auditing for some organization. Your responsibility is only to tell them what all vulnerabilities are present and how to fix them. But say you are working for an organization and you are auditing for your own company, then you should also fix those vulnerabilities. So is this one clear so far? Vijay, when you speak about the service contract, that actually varies from client to client based on what sort of organization and what exactly you are trying to audit, right? So your client or the organization, whoever is authorizing you to perform this audit, right? They will actually be telling you what is the scope of your audit, what all things you are trying to audit, right? Are you auditing the operating systems or are you auditing the applications on the machines or are you trying to audit say only a very specific application within the server. So what exactly you are trying to audit will be defined by your client. So based on that, your terms and conditions also will be changing. Okay. Yeah. And now when you speak about what is the actual process, right? There are two steps that an ethical hacker or a security auditor have to always go through. The first is something called vulnerability audit. So in the vulnerability audit, an ethical hacker will try to identify what all vulnerabilities exist on a remote server. So the first step is to identify what all vulnerabilities exist on the system. And once you know what all vulnerabilities exist on the system, then you go to the second step, which is called penetration testing. Right? Or in short, you also call it as pen testing. So in this pen testing or penetration testing, you will simulate an attack. As a ethical hacker, you will simulate an attack as if it is being done by a black hat hacker. Right? And after you do attack, you see what is the result. Is this attack successful or not? If this attack is successful, what are the damages on the system? What happened to the data? What happened to that server? How is the functionality? Is everything working fine? Or is there any kind of service disruptions? You'll see that, right? And you'll make a note of all those details and then include it into your report. So first, you perform vulnerability audit, try to understand what all vulnerabilities exist on the system. And then you try to perform a penetration test where you will try to simulate an attack and see what actually happens on the server if a black hat hacker is launching an attack. Nagraj, as I said, penetration testing is trying to simulate an attack after you identify the vulnerability, right? So we will discuss how to identify the vulnerabilities, and we will also see once you identify the vulnerability, how an attack will be launched, right? So when you say how the attacks would be launched, it varies from server to server, and it depends on the vulnerability what is found, right? So there is no such thing as how in depth, right? Because it all depends on what kind of vulnerability is there, right? So we'll be discussing about different kind of vulnerabilities, and we will see how hackers are trying to launch attacks on different cases. Okay, so is this clear so far, everyone? Yeah. So now when you speak about today's cyber security, today's networks and all, right? Apart from hacking and ethical hacking terms, you'll also come across some additional terms, right? Like say information security, right? Information assurance. So there are different kind of new terms that you'll also be coming across, right? Now again, don't worry, what is this information security or something else, right? This is again like how do you protect your data, right? So you can say information security is part of your cyber security. Now what exactly are we doing in cyber security? We are trying to identify what is a possibility that someone can launch an attack and how attacks would happen, and then we are trying to prevent it. So this information security is part of cyber security, and information security is like all the set of procedures that you follow to protect your network resources from unauthorized access or maybe some kind of data modifications or data deletions or damaging and all this. Right. So let us see what all different kind of terminologies you will be coming across. So when you speak about information security, there are 5 different aspects that you have to be careful, right? So those are confidentiality. how confidential is your data. So your data, whatever is present on your server or within your organization network or whatever it is, right, should only be accessible to authorized users, right? So whatever data you have in your organization's network should only be accessible to the authorized users. So that is confidentiality. Then data integrity, right? Data integrity refers to information being intact. Intact in the sense your data should not be modified or your data should not be changed, right, without any of your permissions. So if you are the administrator, right, without your knowledge or without your permission, no one should be able to access the data, no one should be able to make any kind of modifications, right? So confidentiality, integrity, and then comes the next step, that is the availability. You have to make sure that authorized users, those users who are permitted to access your data, should always be able to access the data, right? So let's say in your organization you have 100 employees, you have 100 people working in your organization. So from this 100 people, you have given FTP server access to 20 users. So for 20 users, you have provided FTP server access, right? So now these 20 users should always have access to the FTP service. And it is your responsibility to ensure that these 20 people will always have access to the FTP service, right? So that's the data availability. Then authenticity, right? So once someone is accessing your FTP data, as an administrator, you should be able to identify which user is accessing the data. So how would you identify which user is accessing the data? So by asking the end users to log in before they get access to the data, right? You'll be able to create a record on so and so day, so and so user has logged in to FTP server, right? So based on the user authentication, you'll be able to verify these users, right? And then non-repudiation. Non-repudiation is like assurance that someone cannot deny that so and so activity did not happen. Again, this is based on your user authentication. Now let's say a user Raghu has logged in to the FTP server at 9 o'clock, tried to add some files or tried to modify some files. And there is user authentication. On your server, on the FTP server, there are also logs that at 9 o'clock, Raghu has logged in and Raghu has made changes to this file a.doc. So there is a log available. Now, later on, I cannot claim that, no, I did not log into the server and I did not make any changes. Even if I claim that, even if I say, no, I did not log into the server, I did not make any changes, as an administrator, will you be able to prove that at 9 o'clock, Raghu has logged into FTP server and Raghu has made changes to this a.doc file? You'll be able to prove it? Yes, because first thing, I have authenticated before access to the server, and then server is also maintaining a log of every user activity. What is this user doing there, right? So these are the 5 aspects of your information security. Confidentiality, that whatever data is available in your network or on the server should only be accessible to authorized users. Integrity, your data should not be destroyed by someone, right? Availability, all the users who are authorized to access the data, or all the users who are permitted to have access to the data, should always be able to access this information. Authenticity, you should be able to identify which user is logging in and trying to access the data. And then non-repudiation, you should also be able to make sure that you will be able to prove that this is the user who has logged in and this is the user who have done some activities. And that user should not be successful in claiming that I did not do it. Right? So even if user tries to claim that I did not do so also activity, because you have all the authentications and all this, you'll be able to prove that whatever the end user sees is not correct. I have a proof. This is the user. This guy logged in. So time. After logging in, this is the activity this user has performed. Then you also have something called C&A triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Again, all the same aspects that we have discussed earlier. So your communication or your data should always be secure, right? You should have proper confidentiality, that your data is not accessible to unauthorized users, right? Data integrity, that your data cannot be modified or deleted by some end users. And data should always be available, right? So data should always be available to the end users, right? Information assurance is another term that you'll always come across, right? Again, information assurance, right, is again nothing but what all steps that you have taken to protect your computers and network resources. Right. So every nation, every government will try to come up with different kind of. So when you speak about information assurance, this is according to the U.S. government, right? And it says measures that protect and defend information or your information systems by ensuring their availability, integrity, authentication, confidentiality, and non-repudiation. Are these the same aspects that we have discussed in information security? So all aspects that we have discussed in the information security, US government says how exactly you are trying to implement these concepts is what you call as information assurance. Right. Now, see, these are all the theoretical aspects, right? But why you should be aware of this as a administrator or as a ethical hacker is the same concept, is the same thing. You are trying to protect your data from unauthorized access. Right? You are trying to prevent someone from accessing your data without proper authorization from them. But because for the same activity that you do, different nations, different bodies are calling it with different names, you should at least have those basic idea. What is information security? What is information assurance? So it should not be like, okay, what is this information security? I did not come across. It is the same thing, right? But you should at least have some basic idea about different terminology, what is going on. And again, when you speak about information assurance, it's all the same concepts. But as I said, information assurance, this is a terminology given by the government of US. Right. So is it clear so far, everyone? So today, let us speak about what sort of technical terms that you will be coming across as a security auditor or as an administrator. Right. So here you'll always come across something called a threat. So threat can be a situation, right, or it can be an event which can potentially compromise your server or which can potentially compromise your data, right? So a threat is a event or it can be a situation which can damage or which can compromise your data. Attack vector is another term that you always come across, right? So an attack vector is a method using which a hacker can compromise the server. If you recollect at the beginning, I was saying hackers can try to identify vulnerabilities, hackers can try to steal our passwords, hackers can try to use backdoor applications. So can I say vulnerabilities on a system, passwords or compromised passwords and backdoor applications are all different kind of attack vectors. So guys, can I say compromised passwords, backdoor applications and vulnerabilities are all different kind of attack vectors. So attack vectors are those methods or those techniques which hackers are using to compromise your data. Okay. So here, if you see these attack vectors, vulnerabilities, malware infections, misconfigurations, poor encryptions, not properly protecting your data, weak or stolen passwords, right? Or sometimes malicious insiders. So uh, in some cases, there is a possibility that a hacker is present within your network. Right? Or maybe there is someone from your organization, someone within your network who is helping a hacker. Right? So that can also be a possibility. Right? So malicious insiders. So these are all like different kind of attack vectors. So these are all the possibilities based on which some attack can happen on your server or attack can happen against your resources. Maybe some users who are helping a hacker, right? Stolen passwords, right? Poor encryptions, not protecting your data properly, right? And then, as I said earlier, vulnerabilities on the system, malware attacks, misconfigurations, not configuring systems or not configuring the things properly. These all things can lead to a attack. So is it clear, everyone? What are all the different kind of threats and attack vectors on our network? Okay, so these are all the like different kind of technical terms that you should be aware of, right? So you also have a few other terms like cyber kill chain and all this, so that we'll be discussing in the next session, right? So I don't want to bombard you on the day one itself with all different technical terms and all, right? I know the theoretical discussion would not be so good, right? So once we go through this, the terminology and all, then we'll be able to start with our practical parts and all, right? We'll also be able to discuss that. So that we'll continue in the next session tomorrow. Okay, so is it clear, everyone? In case someone has not joined the session earlier, uh, I'm giving you the link using which you can request for the recorded sessions here. So you can fill in your details. So we'll be able to share the recorded sessions. So the previous class session and today's session you'll be receiving both. Or in case you guys have already filled the details, then no need to do it again today, right? So in case for those who are attending today as the first sessions, so that would be for them. Yeah, when you say security plus and cyber security, you are actually doing both the theory as well as the practical part. The security plus it's all the discussion about the concepts. So you'll not be doing things practically there. Okay. Guys, I'll be sharing the WhatsApp group link also, right? So I've not yet created this. I'll be creating it. I'll share the link. Okay. Okay, so if there are no other queries, then I'll be ending the session for today, right? So we'll join in the next session tomorrow. We'll continue with our discussion on the hacking part. Thank you all.